Hello Artcadets and welcome to today's video. So today I thought I'd show you how I use tracing paper to transfer my little sketchbook doodle into a bigger art piece on my watercolour paper. So what I do first of all is I use the sketchbook for a bit of an idea, and then I draw out onto the tracing paper using a pencil the design I have in mind. Now I use tracing paper because it's transparent, and in this particular drawing the example I've got is along the bottom of the picture. As you can see here, I've drawn a plate. So in order to make sure that this is even and symmetrical, I've folded the tracing paper in half, and that will enable me to see if it's symmetrical and straight. Now it's a bit of a bizarre drawing, but in any case, the first thing I do once I've drawn out on my tracing paper is turn it onto the wrong side, so turn it over, and then just using I think I used a brown Prismacolor colour erase pencil, or a regular pencil will do. I just scribble over the back of the tracing paper all over the areas where the drawing is, and I'm just speeding this up a bit. So once I've done that, I then get rid of my scrap paper underneath, because that just helps me see where I'm going and what I'm drawing. And then I bring in my watercolour paper, and the important thing here is to turn the paper over onto the right side, so you should have the drawing the right way around. I then clip the tracing paper to the watercolour paper, and this just helps keep it steady so it doesn't shift about, because what you're going to do next is get your pencil again and draw back over the illustration or the design that you first drew. So this enables you to print basically the drawing straight onto your watercolour paper. So why do this? Well, if you're anything like me, when you're drawing you don't always get it right first time, and there's usually a few rubbings out and adjustments. So this way you get it right first time onto your watercolour paper. So there's no signs of any rubbings out or mistakes that you might have made, which quite easily end up being picked up and show through when you paint over them. So this is a good way to transfer your picture without any rubbings out or mistakes onto your watercolour paper. And once your transfer is complete, it is then time for the next stage, which is putting it onto a piece of board or taping it to your desk or table. So I do this because it keeps it still, and I'm using frog tape, which I think you can get in B&Q and places like DIY stores, because it's useful for painters and decorators. But I found it really good, especially this sensitive one, because it doesn't tear too much at the paper like some tapes do and some masking tapes do, and it peels off really nicely and keeps the edges really clean. And it also, when you're using watercolour paint, helps to stop or prevent, it doesn't completely stop, it helps minimalise the amount of wrinkliness you get in your paper. And this wrinkling or buckling of the paper does go away once it's dry, but it just helps keep things flat and neat really. And I really like the white edge it gives once you peel it off at the end. It gives a really nice border, and I think it helps make it look really professional. So how did I come up with this idea then? Well, it's a bit of a strange one, I have to admit, but I was eating some lemon meringue pie the other day, which I really love, and for some reason a lot of my paintings or my ideas and illustrations end up mixing animals or nature and food together. So hey, but I was eating the meringue and I thought, do you know what, we could draw a polar bear on top of the pie, because a polar bear's fur is typically white. And then yeah, it just kind of turned into a polar meringue pie. So there's not really an explanation, but it's just the way it came about. So with my watercolours, I did start off with a flat wash, so just a plain colour, and I did that in the background starting from the top. And another thing I also do if I'm doing watercolour is I put something underneath the top of my board to slightly make the painting on an angle. So if you're doing watercolour, this is a great idea because it helps the water run down and it doesn't tend to make big pools of water and make your paper all soggy. So that's just one of the tips that I use. And I just did a sort of I wanted the colours to be fairly neutral in a way. So yeah, I did pale blue for the wall behind and a blue jug. Now this jug is meant to be a cream jug because cream goes well with pie. And then the actual pie itself and the top of the meringue just did in sort of pale brown colours. So once it was thoroughly dry, I did as I tend to be doing at the moment and went in with some of my colour pencils just to add some shading and brightness to the colours. And another thing it's worth thinking about when you're transferring a picture or when you're painting or drawing out a picture is where your light is going to come from, because that will tell you where the shadows are going to be. So the light in this picture is kind of coming from the top right hand corner. And so my shadows, where I'm doing my grey pencils now, are going to be on the left hand side. There was a bit of a skip there where my camera actually stopped recording, so it missed the bit where I did some shading underneath the pie there. But that was still colour pencil, the same as I was doing beforehand. Now I've slowed the video down so you can see that to do the sort of toasty bit on top of the meringue, I went in with an orangey colour, toasty meringue kind of colour, and sort of slowly did some darker areas on the meringue to make it look yeah, just realistic as possible, as realistic as a polar bear pie can be, but as realistic as meringue can look. And that meant that I was doing some darker areas and blending them out into less dark areas and still remembering to leave some white areas for the dips in the meringue. I went in with some darker colours just to outline the pie base and also the bear himself, just to give it a bit of an edge. And you'll also notice that I've done some shading under the lemon and under the jug as well. And as I said, this just is in an attempt to show you where the light's coming from. At this point here, I just also decided to go around the board that the pie's on and just went in with a fine pencil just to clean those edges up. Now at this stage here, as again I've been tending to do, is to add some soft pastel, and just did that to give a bit more depth to the drawing, I guess, and went in with a blue for the top and a sort of an orangey brown for the bottom, as well as some grey for the plate. Now this is exciting. I bought this sort of template, I guess, or stencil, and I thought at this point the picture looked a little bit plain, so I used this. It's like a plastic template, and I think they're meant to be bubbles, but I thought this would kind of jazz the outside or the edge of my picture up and just give it a bit more texture, and I really was quite pleased with how it turned out. It just made it a bit more interesting, I think, and obviously I got a bit carried away, and as well as doing the top I did the bottom as well, but I really was pleased with the effect, and I think it really made the picture a lot more interesting. And then all that was left was to peel off the tape, and this is, I love doing this bit, and it gives such clean edges, and it does come off pretty nicely. It doesn't stick too much and tear the paper, although it's slightly bit at the top here actually, having said that. But yeah, that was it. I hope you really enjoyed doing this picture with me, and I will see you again soon.